let's answer all the questions everyone is wondering after Jujutsu Kaisen's final chapter. Firstly, who was Satoru freaking Gojo's parents? And what about the rest of the clan? Don't they care that he died? Well, Gege answered that Gojo sees it from the perspective that anyone could die at any moment. Even Satoru felt angry when Itadori supposedly died, so we can expect that his parents mourn. After all, it was revealed they are still alive, but unlike their son, they are not strong sorcerers and have weak abilities. However, even though 80% of strength is based on genetics, Gojo's parents were upgraded to high status within the clan after birthing him. This is because Gojo was born with the 6 eyes and limitless after hundreds of years. This led to Satoru being separated from his parents at a very young age to focus on his training, but he often skipped and escaped, so he had a fair amount of fun. For example, in chapter 96, Ogami and the others saw a kid Gojo walking down the city alone. Gege clarified that he is an only child, and whilst growing up, Gojo's life was anything but ordinary. Due to his power, he was treated specially by both his family and the Jujutsu world, leading to a rather isolated childhood. It was Gojo's wish to join Jujutsu Tech as he was fed up with his overbearing family. This isolation also influenced his goal of creating stronger allies and destroying the rotten, corrupt world, which of course ends up happening in the final chapter 271. However, as the head of the Gojo family, Satoru had considerable amount of assets, which made him rich in Kyoto, as that's where the clan's main house is located. But with the finale, we know the hierarchy of elite clans is now destroyed, with a new generation forming a culture that revolves around positivity rather than being selfishly motivated. Now this leaves one question hanging, and it's a good one. What happened to Gojo's body after his death? Well, it's pretty simple. The gang cremated his body right before Sumiki's cremation, and this was done so a situation like Geto wouldn't repeat itself. So yeah, Gege even off-screen Gojo's burial.
I'm so sick of this company. They're trash!
But with Satoru freaking Gojo's death, that means another 6 eyes user will eventually be born. Even Kenjaku had killed one as a child, but it reappeared swiftly. But this time, the new 6 eyes user won't be declared the strongest instantly, since the balance of the world has completely changed. As Satoru's dream came true that the next generation will all surpass his ceiling of power, making the next 6 eyes leader of his clan be normalized, washing away their curse, being able to live a normal life unlike Satoru Gojo did. But let's talk about his counterpart Sukuna, a man 1,000 years ago that had no loved ones, no wife, and no children. There are so many questions regarding this dude, such as who is his mother, why was he called the Fallen, who was the other woman in the final chapter, and what was their story in the Heian era. Well, in chapter 271, we find out that the king became who he is because of his desire for revenge. When Sukuna was born, he was declared the Fallen One by people like Angel who followed God's creed. This is evident through chapter 237, where Sukuna admitted he was a scorned child. In sorcery, twins are seen as a bad omen, but Sukuna took it a step further by eating his twin due to his mother being hungry, which labeled him a curse instantly by society for cannibalism. So, as Yuji explained, it was just Sukuna's bad luck that he ended up getting cursed, and he had a choice to make: either live as a human who strived to be good, or walk down the path of a curse. Now, unlike Sukuna, Yuji wasn't consumed by the curse he was born with, as his granddad raised him well and was there for him. But in chapter 271, Sukuna acknowledges and reveals he did have an alternative path that could have saved him, but he chose not to take it. This is because he was afraid the curse he was born into was so much that if he didn't let it out on others, it would consume him. As a result, during the Heian era 1,000 years ago, Sukuna chose the latter. He evolved his body into a divine being, learning the core of curse energy and perfected his sorcery. This is to the point that Kashimo even considered him a deity. His efficiency was on par with Gojo despite not having the 6 eyes. Now it's important to note that Sukuna was known as the king of curses as a human being. He was feared like no other before he even split his soul into objects when Kenjaku taught him. He gained his status via his training and overwhelming power, living up to the stature of doing whatever he wanted when he pleased instead of following the rules of the Heian era. For example, another question you're probably wondering, who were the Fujiwara, Sugawara and Abe clans that Sukuna supposedly destroyed? Well, since Jujutsu Kaisen follows real-life history closely, it can all be explained. For example, the Sugawara clan was a family known for their contributions to scholarship and government. Their most famous member was Sugawara no Michizane, who is an ancestor of Yuta and Gojo. However, due to political rivalry with the Fujiwara clan, he was falsely accused of treason and exile, where he later died, which is why he is a vengeful spirit in Jujutsu Kaisen. The Fujiwara clan used strategic marriages and politics to dominate the imperial court and played a major role in shaping culture. But the Abe clan, they were known for their military power, where they all often clashed. This all starts to make sense since Kenjaku confirmed he was involved in all of this during the Heian era. He stirred conflicts using his brain-hopping technique. He admits it in chapter 206 when Kenjaku retorts that Tengen never truly lived and was passive for 1,000 years. On the other hand, he has lived, a tug of war between feuding giants, including the alliances and betrayals. Another piece of evidence that cements it is the fact that Sukuna knew of the vengeful spirit Yamato no Orochi when he faced Mahoraga, and in chapter 219, during the Heian era, they all prayed to the dude for a plentiful harvest, as his revenge caused him to become so powerful that the 5 Void generals had to please him, even though Sukuna had just killed the elite Fujiwara clan only recently. Now, regarding how Sukuna evolved into this divine being 1,000 years ago, how did it happen? Well, Mahito gave us the answer to that question. He first tasted death, which gave him a better understanding of his own soul and unlocked domain expansion. Being near death makes you stronger as it allows you to understand the core of curse energy. In chapter 161, we find out that the sorcerers in the golden age of sorcery during Sukuna's time desired to fight to death, and it was normal to do so, which would explain why he's so powerful compared to the modern day. But now the next few questions arise. Who's Sukuna's mother, and how did Tengen become a deity 1200 years ago? Well, since Buddhism is real in Jujutsu Kaisen, it's possible Sukuna's mother was none other than Tengen herself. Once you hear this, you're gonna lose your mind. We know that Sukuna ate his twin brother inside his mother's womb due to hunger, as his mother was starving herself. Now, of course, Tengen wouldn't be starving due to poverty, since we know she has a massive following and the entirety of Jujutsu society's balance falls on her shoulders, even going so far as to say she's considered a deity in society. We also can't forget that Tengen was the one who spread Japanese Buddhism and preached what would become the foundation for sorcerers during the Nara period. And we know the samsara cycle of rebirth existed since Sukuna's brother reincarnated into Yuji's father a millennia later. So in other words, Tengen was a devoted Buddhist who sought enlightenment to escape the cycle of rebirth so that the barriers of Japan can be upheld forever. Otherwise, 1,000 years of progress against curses would be undone, like Kenjaku said. This makes even more sense when we see Sukuna's original body found inside Tengen's barrier, which was sitting in a Buddhist pose of Soken Shibutsu. People who practice this gain access to one of the 7 heavens, whose residents live for 1.6 million years before re-entering the samsara cycle of rebirth. However, the only way to do this is to give up eating until they reach the point of death, just to enter mummification while still being alive. No wonder Sukuna was hungry enough to eat his brother to survive. It also answers why Sukuna's face is part of a tree, and why Tengen becomes a tree at the end of her life, since it involves a strict diet called mokijiki, meaning eating a tree. But let's get to another important question. Why the hell was Principal Yaga's curse technique so freaking high? The whole reason Gakuganji even killed his friend was because the higher-ups wanted his formula to get this information. And what did Gakuganji do with it? Nothing? But this was Gakuganji's own character development. He was an advocate of the higher-ups of society, which Gojo deeply hated, and he would do anything to make sure the rules followed through, right? Gakuganji even tells his students to kill Yuji during the Goodwill event just because the rules dictate that he must be executed. But now, this time, it was different. Gakuganji killed his friend for the sake of the higher-ups, but didn't reveal the information to them just as Gojo had predicted, that he had changed in chapter 223. So that's it. Gakuganji had decided to take Principal Yaga's secret with him to the grave, showing the development of his character, where at the start of the series, he would have revealed that information to the higher-ups in a heartbeat. This is emphasized in chapter 270 when he told Utehime to chill out and not rush into things, because Yuji and the others are still young and should live out their lives having fun. But another important question that has everyone scratching their heads: what happened to the world like China and America coming to know about curse energy? I mean, you can't just drop a bombshell like that to the world that a new type of energy exists that Japan just so happens to have a monopoly of and just never mention it again? Kenjaku exposed the myth that ghosts and monsters actually exist in the form of cursed spirits. Additionally, Yuki stated to Kenjaku in chapter 136 that only a few sorcerers exist that can manipulate cursed energy outside of Japan. But why is that? Well, curse energy is based on the negative emotions that accumulate as a collective. But we know that so many countries are in war or turmoil, and that would make sense to have more sorcerers compared to Japan. Superpowers such as the USA, Russia, China, and India would have the highest amount of curse energy and should be able to spawn at least maybe, I don't know, 1,000 Sukuna each due to their various issues in their countries. Also, what the hell happened to all the sorcerers who were abducted by the US military? Well, for starters, Gege stated that he didn't want to draw the army guys anymore, so he just dropped that plot.
Really?
Yep. I'm not kidding. And then Maki revealed in chapter 270 that they need to save the sorcerers who were in the US military by using Yuji and Hana to get rid of the cursed objects inside of them. She then revealed that somehow the entire world that witnessed Sukuna's fight with Gojo and the gang, as remember, Mei was broadcasting it, it was just a phenomenon that occurred in Tokyo. So yeah, Gege answered this huge question by stating that America, China, and more were convinced that cursed spirits gather in Tokyo exclusively, which has made it so that curses are gathering over there. But logically speaking, we know that knowledge given to such powerful countries would still make them invade Japan, and geopolitically would want more answers. However, Gege said, let's skip all of that because it's too complicated and I've run out of chapters. However, what about Tengen's barriers and Japan having a monopoly on cursed energy where sorcerers only appear in this country? Well, the answer to that question is in chapter 270. As it is revealed, Tengen did die, but right now Sukuna's finger is playing the role of upholding the barriers since her remnants were found inside it. So as long as it's preserved, everything will be fine, given the fact that Sukuna's soul moved on in the samsara cycle to go north to be reborn as a good person in chapter 271. The 1/20th part of Sukuna's soul within the final finger doesn't exist anymore, and since it's an indestructible curse object as well, Yuji can now claim everything is alright. But let's move on to some questions that you guys wrote in the comments and in our community, like what happened to Yuji's mom and dad, and did Yuji's grandfather know about Jujutsu or even Kenjaku? Like, why did the Kenjutsu even make Yuji in the first place? Since our MC was the reason his merger plan failed? Isn't that some tragic irony? Well, for starters, Yuji's mom was a Jujutsu sorcerer. She had her own curse technique, which is called the anti-gravity system, that literally saved Kenjaku against Yuki's black hole. However, when it comes to Yuji's grandfather, he knew something was off. He even stated in chapter 143 that if Jin didn't give up on that woman, he would die, hinting at the fact that Kenjaku ended up killing Yuji's dad later on, and on his deathbed within chapter 1, the granddad was about to tell Yuji this information, but our MC wasn't listening, so it's too bad. Then, Sukuna informed us that Kenjaku found out that his twin brother reincarnated into Jin Itadori. He learned this information during the Heian era. Once he had found out, Kenjutsu made a plan to kill Yuji's mom to take a technique and then get pregnant, taking back shots, since he knew Jin always wanted to have a baby, as he said himself in chapter 143. So, with all these desires intermingling, it perfectly aligned with Kenjaku's own goal. Remember, he wanted to create human evolution through the optimization of curse energy. Kenjaku knew that Sukuna was born cursed, and he wanted to recreate this bad luck into Yuji, forming a cycle of curses that would never end, fueling his plan, where he eventually claimed the cycle will keep on going as long as Yuji and Sukuna are still alive. It was the same when it came to Choso and his brothers. They were just experiments, but they turned out to be failures due to being too ordinary, as whatever Kenjaku created, it did not exceed the bounds of his own potential, which is why he wanted to do the merger in the first place. And in chapter 203, Yuji was called the fire signal that was the start of a new era, where Kenjaku ensured his son would eat Sukuna's finger. So like an idiot, Kenjaku basically gave birth to Yuji due to curiosity. But remember, that saying that we all know, curiosity killed the cat, and that's exactly what happened with Kenjaku. Well, funnily enough, this guy did come back through Takaba's curse technique. But to be honest, it's all in Takaba's head, since he had the most fun as a comedian with Kenjaku and was learning 1,000 years worth of jokes from him. So Kenjaku isn't really back, and Gege hiding his face is a form of showing us that all of it isn't real. But wait, everyone is still asking, what was Yuji's domain expansion? Well, it was Shrine, but upgraded where the slashes hit the soul on top of the body. Yuji could also resonate with the soul of the person within it to speak to them, as he can see the contours of anyone. The soul and body are made up of strings of information, and Yuji can access the memories within the brain to explore it with that person. So just call it Benevolent Shrine. However, there are still a few more questions that you guys asked me to answer, like with chapter 271 establishing a more peaceful society, the girl that loves Yuji and wants to be his girlfriend, that's probably going to happen. His occult club friends from high school will now have PTSD and need therapy, but will still hang out with Yuji again. However, now let's answer the biggest question of all. Isn't the Culling game ongoing, since it can't end unless all players die except for Megami and Geto? So technically speaking, you're right, the Culling game is still ongoing by the end of the manga, but its function has changed from what Kenjaku had originally intended. The players were no longer rampant and murdering each other on the streets. Many of them were either killed naturally, where Kenjaku killed most of them, and currently the rest are either hiding or still fighting to survive in the center of colonies. Plus, with the new rule addition, it's easier for players to live more freely and peacefully. It's not the Culling games as we know it, it's just a bunch of players remaining and cursed spirits that will eventually be dealt with, since Hana and Yuji are helping to separate the cursed objects from the players. And as we saw in chapter 271, with the team forming again, they dealt with a new user so easily and got him rehabilitation. Yuji told him, join our team, be a good guy, and they're figuring it out like that. This also, by removing the cursed objects from the ancient players, it will bring back the original person to gain their body. So you're probably thinking, ABD, what about the merger? What about the new creature? creature that Kenjaku wanted to create? Well, it will never start, since there is no mastermind behind the Culling games to activate it as Kenjaku claimed. Unless they get rid of the barriers, but they're never gonna get rid of the barriers because Sukuna is preserving it. And it's only Megami Fushiguro who can press the button as he inherited it, which he will never do now. So it's never gonna happen, guys. I'm sorry, unless Gege decides to do a sequel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to answer as many questions as possible that you're probably wondering and scratching your heads, oh, I don't know what's going on. But to enjoy more peak fiction on your screen right now, watch this video about Blue Lock, where Isagi becomes the #1 striker in the entire world.